Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever found yourself sitting in silence, watching the hours pass on your bed, knowing deep down that something inside you is calling for action, but you just don't move, are slumbering on your bed? You feel the weight of stillness. You hear the inner voice whisper on your bed, you should be doing something right now. But instead, the mind negotiates with time, saying, just a little more rest. And then rest becomes escape. Escape becomes avoidance. Avoidance becomes identity. This, when you are slumbering on your bed, is the laziness we're going to destroy today. Because this isn't just about productivity. It's about your aliveness. You didn't come here to exist. You came here to create, to give, to move forward. And in this talk, Lumbering Your Bed, we're going to uncover how to kill laziness from the root. Not by shaming it, slumbering on your bed, but by understanding it and then setting it on fire with something deeper than motivation. You were not bed. You were not born lazy. You were born as a vessel of infinite possibility on your bed, full of movement, creativity, and desire to explore the world around you. As children, we run before we walk. We ask before we think. We create before we're taught on your bed. The energy, the enthusiasm, the natural drive. It's all there. But something happens along the way. Slowly, we absorb messages from our environment. We on your bed. We learn the art of waiting. Bed. We start believing that comfort is more valuable than growth. And in that shift, slumbering your bed, laziness doesn't just enter. It settles. Not because you chose it consciously, because no teen on your bed, but because no one taught you that it's just a mental loop. Not your identity, your bed. Laziness is a learned habit. It's not carved into your DNA. It's not a condition you inherited. It's simply a repeated decision to avoid discomfort. And the more you avoid on your bed, the more it becomes a routine. That routine becomes a rhythm. And before long, you're not just doing lazy things. You start to call yourself lazy. And the moment you give something a name, you give it life. You give it permission to stay. Your bed. You reinforce it every time you say, that's just how I am. But that's a lie. That's slumbering your bed. That's not who you are. That's just what you've practiced. Your bed. Think about how many times you've said, your bed. I just can't get myself to do it. You're not wrong. Feel stuck. But that feeling of stuckness is not fixed. It's just a moment of inertia. And inertia can be broken the moment you shift from thought to action, even if it's big. If it's the tiniest action. The hardest part of moving is the very beginning. Once momentum starts, something changes inside. On your bed, it's not that laziness disappears overnight, but it loses its grip when you are slumbering on your bed. Because what you do consistently is stronger than what you believe passively. Your mind is powerful, but it is also programmable. When you are slumbering on your bed, If you've repeated a message long enough, it starts to feel like truth. I'm lazy. It'll never change. I'm not disciplined. These are not truths. Slumbering on your bed. These are mental recordings. And like any recording, they can be erased. They can be overwritten. The real you, the one beneath the conditioning, is not lazy. Lumbering on your bed. The real you is waiting, watching, listening for a moment of courage. Lumber on your bed. A moment when you stop feeding the lie and start awakening your natural energy. Bed. Laziness thrives in confusion. It grows in the soil of self-doubt. Slumbering on your bed. When you don't know where you're going or why it matters. Bed. The default reaction is to do nothing. But that inaction is not a lack of ability. It's a lack of connection to purpose, to clarity, to emotion. Bed. Once you reconnect to something meaningful, something shifts. Suddenly. Lumber in your bed. You remember what it feels like to want to act, not because you should. You are slumber in your bed, but because something inside you is awake. When you lumber in your bed, you begin to understand that you were never lazy. You were just uninspired, uncentered, unanswered from what truly matters. The problem that we live in a world that celebrates urgency, but has little to nourish purpose. We're told to hustle, to grind, to move fast, but not to ask why. So we chase productivity without peace. And when we crash, we blame ourselves. We call it laziness on your bed. But it's really burnout from running in circles without a destination that nourishes the soul. When you are slumbering on your bed, when you pause long and to look beyond the surface, you see the truth. You don't need to fight laziness. You need to understand it. When you are slumbering on your bed, you need to realize that it's not a character flaw. It's a signal. Slumbering on your bed, it's pointing to a deeper misalignment, a loss of inner rhythm. Lumbering your bed. And once you stop fighting yourself and start listening, you can make different choices. Not forced choices, but conscious ones. Small. When you are slumbering your bed, honest steps that reconnect you to who you were before the labels, before the guilt, before your bed. Killing laziness doesn't mean working yourself into the ground. Slumbering on your bed, it means waking up to the reality that you are more than your habits. You are the one who created them, and you are one who can uncreate them. All are slumbering on your bed. All it takes is awareness and intention. Once you say to yourself, this is not who I am, this is just what I've done, a new path opens. And that path isn't lit by pressure. It's lit by truth on your bed. And truth moves faster than any temporary burst of motivation. The moment you stop calling yourself late is the moment you begin to take your power back and slumber in your bed. Not because you've suddenly become hyper-productive, are slumbering on your bed, but because you've removed the lie that was chaining you to stillness on your bed. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to reintroduce yourself to the part of you that's been buried under years of inaction and negative self-talk. Bed. And the beautiful thing is, that part of you is still alive. It's still breathing. It's still ready. There is a silent war between the person you are and the person you are becoming, slumbering on your bed. And that battlefield lies between your thoughts and your action. Remembering your bed. Every one of us has good intentions. When we're slumbering on your bed, we tell ourselves we're going to start that project, finish that book, fix that habit. Improving on your bed, improve our health, rebuild our focus. And in that moment of intention, something lights up inside. It feels true. It feels powerful. But time passes and the emotion fades. The day ends and the intention dissolves. Slumbering your bed. What remains is only a whisper of the promise we once made to ourselves. On your bed, and that gap between what we want to do and what we actually do is where laziness lies. It waits for us there. It thrives in that space, your bed. But there is one thing that can close that gap. When you are slumbering on your bed, one force that builds the bridge from thought to behavior, that force is discipline. Not in the rigid, punishing way people often portray it, but in its truest forming a daily decision to honor your purpose, regardless of how you feel. Discipline is the quiet friend who walks beside you when motivation has disappeared. It's the structure that keeps your dreams alive when your emotions try to convince you they're not worth it. On your bed, because emotions are temporary, but commitment is chosen. When you are on your bed, we've been trained to believe that we should only act when we feel ready. On your bed, when we feel inspired, when the conditions are ideal. But life doesn't bend to our moods. Time doesn't wait for our emotional alignment. And the truth is, we rarely feel like doing that will grow us. We want ease, we want comfort. But discipline is the art of doing what's necessary. Our slumber in your bed, even when it's not convenient. It's the promise you make to your higher self on your bed, and the follow-through that builds your character one day at a time. Intention without discipline is a fantasy. It's a beautiful idea that never breathes. When you are slumbering on your bed, you can spend years talking about what you'll do someday. You can design goals, write plans, visualize outcomes, but none of it matters without action. On your bed, and action requires structure. Structure gives birth to progress. Slumbering on your bed, discipline is the father of that structure. When you're slumbering on your bed, it's what anchors you when your thoughts start to drift. When you are slumbering your bed, it doesn't ask if you're in the mood. It just reminds you who you said you wanted to be. Slumbering on your bed. Discipline is not harsh. It's compassionate. It's the deepest form of self-respect. It's saying, you are slumbering on your bed. I matter enough to follow through. It's choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort. Slumbering your bed. It's waking up early when your bed feels warm. Because your vision is worth more than a few extra minutes of sleep. It's doing the workout, having the difficult conversation, finishing the task, your bed, turning off the distraction, not because it's easy on your bed, because it aligns with the life you're building. People often ask, how do I stop being lazy? And the answer is not to wait for some magical moment of inspiration. The answer is to create a system, a routine, a schedule that removes guesswork. Because when you leave space for indecision, laziness walks right in. It convinces you to delay. But when your day is structured around non-negotiables, discipline becomes automatic. It becomes a habit. And once discipline becomes a habit, laziness has no home on your bed. There's something deeply spiritual about keeping a commitment to yourself. It tells your soul, I can trust myself. And that trust builds self-worth. The more you more. Do what you say you will do. Bed. The more your mind begins to see you as reliable, that reliability becomes identity. Your bed. You stop identifying as someone who struggles to follow through and start living as someone who does what needs to be done. Not perfectly, not without failure, but with consistency. Slumber in your bed. Because discipline doesn't require perfection. It just requires that you keep showing up. There is a moment in every person's life where they feel a deep inner surge, a spark of clarity that something must change. That spark is called purpose. It isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. Sometimes it whispers in the quiet moments, when everything else is gone, silent. It might come when you're tired of being tired, when you've wasted too many days numbing yourself with distraction, slumber in your bed, or when you finally admit you're capable of more. That is the moment purpose reveals itself, not as an obligation, but as an invitation. Purpose is the inner fire that makes laziness impossible, not because it forces you to work harder, but because it aligns your energy with something greater than comfort. When you're connected to your purpose, you don't need to be pushed, you're pulled. It becomes the gravity behind your actions, the meaning behind your effort, and the power behind your persistence. And when that fire is alive inside you, endeavoring on your bed, there's no room for the weight of excuses, no space for the noise of delay. You stop questioning whether it's worth it and start becoming, and start the kind of person who shows up not out of duty, but out of devotion. But purpose alone is not enough. Purpose is a spark, not a system. And the mistake most people make is thinking the fire will keep itself alive. They chase when you are slumbering on your bed of passion, but to build the structure that holds it. And that's where routine comes in. Routine is not boring. Routine is sacred. It's the daily rhythm that honors your highest calling, even on the days when you don't feel the fire burning as bright. Because motivation fades, energy fluctuates, emotions shift, but a well-crafted routine doesn't ask how you feel. It simply reminds you who you are and where you're going. And where you're going. There's a quiet discipline in choosing to build your life around habits that serve your deeper mission. When you wake up with intention, when you write, move, read, reflect, or work at the same hour each day, not because someone told you to, but because it aligns with the life you've chosen. You are feeding your purpose with consistency. You are protecting the fire. You are turning passion into progress. Laziness thrives in chaos. When there is no plan, no order, no routine, the mind on your bed, the mind wanders. Energy scatters. But when you create structure, slumbering on your bed, you create a container for your energy to flow. On your bed, you remove the decision fatigue that leads to procrastination. You limber on your bed. You eliminate the constant internal debate of, should I or shouldn't I? Instead, you just do. And in the doing, you build momentum. And with momentum, you become in your bed. You become unstoppable. Not because every day is easy, but because every day is intentional. On your bed, people often wait to feel inspired before they act. On your bed, but the ones who win are the ones who act until they feel inspired. Your bed. Routine becomes the spark on the days when purpose feels distant. Are slumbering on your bed. It becomes the bridge between now and next, between drifting and direction. On your bed, the more you repeat a pattern, the more it becomes identity and bed. And when your identity is built on structure, on your bed, your purpose no longer relies on mood swings. It becomes your natural state. Laziness is not your identity. It is a conditioned response to disconnection. Misalignment on your bed, misalignment, and the absence of clear structure. It begins as a whisper, grows through an action, and disguises itself as tiredness. When in reality, bed, it is your soul signaling for direction. You are not broken, your bed. And you are not doomed to live in cycles of avoidance and regret. On your bed, the power to shift exists within you now. While slumbering on your bed, when you recognize that laziness is merely a pattern, not a permanent part of who you are, you reclaim the power to change it. You are slumbering in your bed. You become the observer of your choices rather than the prisoner of your habits. With discipline, you no longer depend on fleeting motivation. You build momentum through deliberate actions that align with your values. On your bed, discipline becomes your quiet companion, the steady presence that carries your intentions into reality, even when everything inside you wants to pause. But this transformation goes deeper than daily action. Slumbering on your bed, it's about spiritual connection. When you feel spiritually disconnected, life feels heavier, and every task becomes a mountain. Slumbering on your bed. But once you realign with your purpose, once you stop running on autopilot and begin to live with conscious intention, energy flows back into your life. Laziness fades, not through guilt, but through clarity. When you are slumbering on your bed, you start to move not because you have to, because you remember who you are, bed, and what you are capable of. Purpose is the ignition, but routine is the fuel. Together are slumber in your bed. They create the system that silences doubt, destroys delay, and places stagnation with progress. When you know why you're here, and you structure your days around that truth, no amount of distraction or fatigue can keep you from becoming who you're meant to be. You are not here to waste time. You are here to rise, to act, to lead, and to create. Fire you seek is already inside you, buried beneath the noise, the fears, and the excuses. But it is not gone. It only needs your attention. You are slumbering in your bed, and once you give it that, you will never again confuse stillness for laziness. You will know exactly who you are and how powerful you've always been.